Hi YouTube, Wes Stampley here, JWS Repair Service. Today we're going to be going back old school. We're going to be working on a 1984 Honda ATC 200M, one of the old three-wheelers. It's right behind me, and you may be able to see it right there. We'll get closer in on it in a minute. But anyway, we're going to be getting that thing back running again. This is a one-owner machine, which is really unique, so that's kind of neat to be able to work on that. It's apparently been a really good machine, and it's in really good shape for its age. So stay tuned and we'll get started getting the carburetor removed. Okay, we're going to start by removing the seat. Lift that up, just set that back there. We're going to remove the fuel tank and the fuel line, and that's just a 10mm bolt right here. Remove that. I should have gotten a socket, but I didn't. But you could definitely do this with a socket a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. We'll go ahead and get that off. You've got a bolt and a washer is what should have been on there. Hopefully yours has that if you're working on one. We'll now turn the petcock or the fuel tap off. And then we're going to use some needle nose and just remove the fuel line. And we'll lift up, get it off the grommet, and slide it back. We'll put our tank to the side. Now what we've got is the carburetor. Oh, it's still going to be hard to see, but there are a couple of nuts here that hold the carburetor on, and then you've got attached to the air box back here, the carburetor sandwiched in between the air box and the engine. So we've got to get this wrestled out right here. So hopefully you'll be able to see that, or it's fairly self-explanatory once you get in there. We'll remove these two nuts that mount the carburetor. Okay, there's one. And there's one on the other side. Okay, that's off. Now what we're going to do is remove this slide cap and get the slide out of it, so we can get that out of the way, and that's pretty tight. So we're gonna get some pliers on that, gently remove that. Normally they're not quite this tough to get off, but at the age of the machine, the fact it's been sitting for quite a while, there's an O-ring in the top of this, or really more like a rubber washer in the top of it, and it's got it pretty stiff. So we'll pull that out, and you can see that the slide needle itself is got quite a bit of gook on there. So we're expecting this carburetor to be plenty dirty, so we'll see what we've got. Now we're going to remove the lid from the air box. It's just got these 4 wing nuts, if it still has the factory setup. This bike is all original, which is once again quite a treat. It's been a long time since I've seen a three-wheeler that was really probably 99% factory. And I think the only thing that's not factory on it are the grips. So here we go. Okay, now we've got that out of the way, and here's our first sign of some trouble. This is a dirt dauber nest, and something that's a little worrisome about some of these old three-wheelers is this middle tube right here that goes up. This top frame rail is the air intake. What you're looking at here, this metal cover is covering a series of holes that is drilled into this frame tube. And this top tube that runs all the way down here is for the air intake. It goes directly to your air box. A lot of times these things will start running very, very poorly. It'll seem like the choke's on all the time. And a lot of times, better than not, you'll have it where dirt daubers have gotten up in here and built a nice big nest in here. The first evidence that you'll notice of that are in the air box. You'll see some of that nest may fall in this box here. So whenever you see that, you need to make sure that this tube is clear. Now, I would like to say that there's an easy way to clean this tube, but there's not. This cap is welded on. The holes you can't reach directly. So about the only way that you can actually clean this out if it's full of dirt daubers is to take a garden hose, go in through the hole in the air box, and push it up in here and try to melt that dirt or turn it back into mud and force it to come out the top, and it goes everywhere. So just be aware, but be sure to keep that really, really clean. So I'm going to check that real quick. I'm going to pause the video while I'm doing that, then I'll be right back with you. Okay, we got lucky on this one. That wasn't a big problem though. The only dirt dauber nest that I could find in there was what had already fallen out into the air box, so that was really nice. So what I'm going to do now is loosen the clamp that is on the rubber grommet coming from the carburetor to the air box. And if it's in its factory configuration, if I can see it through here, and it is, the screw will be, you'll access it through this hole in the top of the frame. Sometimes guys will get in there and take these things off and put them back in the wrong place. And then you have to try to go from the sides or whatever to get to it. But luckily this one, it's not really been worked on very much, so they don't build them like they used to. Now, we're going to take the choke cable off. We'll loosen this clamp. Pull the cable out of the holder. I'm also going to move this harness back a little bit. There's a clip made onto the frame that's holding this harness in, so we're going to get that out of the way so we can actually see what's going on. Now I've got the cable out of the holder. Now we're going to get it out of the choke lever on the carburetor itself. We're just going to push that back to where the slot is, and with my trusty needle nose here, get that out of there. Okay, now that's loose. Now everything that's holding the carburetor or in the way of the carburetor is out of the way, and I hope my head wasn't in that whole shot. Alright, now I'm going to go around to the other side. What we're going to do is push this carburetor back like so and see if it will. We'll get it off the studs, and then hopefully we'll be able to get it out of the boot that comes out of the carburetor. Of course, it's old, so it's going to be pretty stiff, but we'll see what we can do to get it to let go and come loose. We've got part of it loose, but not the whole thing. It's been in its happy home for quite a while, and it doesn't want to come out. Alright, let's see. We've almost got it turned here. And there we go. Now we can slide this out. There we go. There is the
It's me. How y'all doing?
carburetor removed. Okay. Okay. Now we'll be ready to disassemble this carburetor. I'll take the drain tube out first, and wow, that's amazing how hard rubber can get after it's decades old. We're going to pull the fuel line off. I like to go ahead and take the choke lever and cable assembly off, just so that when we soak it in our dip, it doesn't damage it. And I'm not expecting that it would, but just to get it off there is a spring behind this, so be careful of that. It's fairly stout. It fits into a groove behind here, so we put that back together. I'll show you how that works, but it fits. Well, I'll show you when I put it. It's easier when it's actually on here. So we'll take our bowl screws out. There's 3 of those. And there goes some fuel, which is why I've got it sitting on a rag. Alright. We'll take those out, and then for the moment of truth, we'll give that a tap, and yes, there's the money shot. Yeah, that's been sitting for a day or two. Yeah, most definitely. That's pretty nasty right there, but our dip will clean that up really well, and we'll come back and look at that. This is actually a replacement carburetor. This should say Makuni on it, or excuse me, Kian on it, but this is GS Design Japan. So what that's actually telling me is it might be GS Design in Japan, but it's a Chinese aftermarket. So hopefully the jetting is all correct and it'll run properly when we get finished with it. But yeah, always be careful on these Chinese carburetors, because they'll say they fit stuff, and while they might physically fit, they may not be jetted for that machine, because they try to make them fit 20 different machines, which is not possible, but they'll do it anyway. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and disassemble this over here, but I meant to. Let's go ahead and we'll take the fuel screw out. Wow, that's pretty stiff. Be careful when you grab these fuel screws, because they do have a tendency to kind of chemically weld themselves to the aluminum. And if you grab it and just start yanking on it real fast, you may end up breaking it off. So we're going to get the screw and the spring out. Now we've got a washer to O-ring in there as well. When you get those out. Okay, I've got my pick. And we'll take the O-ring out here. We'll remove the O-ring from the bowl. Now we do have a kit for this, so we will be kitting it. So we'll have new O-rings to put in there, but I'm just going to remove them so they don't gunk up my cleaner. We'll go ahead and take this drain screw out. There it is. Take this drain screw out, because it may or may not have an O-ring on it, because this is it does have an O-ring. Okay. Well, apparently it's a fairly accurate Chinese aftermarket. Sometimes they leave these out and they'll put a screw in there that does not have an O-ring on it. So we're going to carefully remove that O-ring. And when I say careful, the kit should come with a new one. But more importantly, careful is I don't want to ram this pick through my finger. So that can leave a mark, and I've only done it about 18 bajillion times. But then I've been doing this for quite a while anyway. But anyway, alright, so we got that O-ring off. We'll put that screw aside. Now, if you're new to the channel, you're going to be like, what are you doing with a center punch? If you're not new to the channel, you know exactly what I'm doing with it. But I'm going to, for those of you that may be new here, this is the way you remove float pins without breaking these float perches off. These float perches are not super easy to break off, but they can be at times. Now this is not, or shouldn't be, a press pin float on this one, but a lot of the newer stuff, these are pressed into one side. And if they are, they'll have a little arrow in here somewhere to designate which way the pin is supposed to go. But this is an older style, so it shouldn't have a press pin. But nevertheless, they can still get stuck at times. So what I use is an automatic center punch, which basically you load it and it pops, and will pop that. Once it pops, it'll hit it pretty hard and then release it. You'll see that broke there's gunk on the end of this, and it broke that loose. And a lot of times if you just grab that and try to force it out without breaking it loose first, you can actually break these perches off, or these protrusions, on the carburetor, these are called float perches. This one here and this one here. It's where your pin goes through. Alright, so that pin is pretty dirty. We'll put that in our bowl for soaking. We'll take our float out now. Oh yeah, there's our float valve, and it's just, we got a new one. We're going to replace that. Float doesn't have anything in it, so it may be dirty, but at least it's not busted. But you'll see here, this is not as common in modern times as it was back in the day. But if you look closely at this seat right here, you'll see that you can't unscrew it. There's not a little fork over it holding it in with the screw. These are actually pressed in, and they're not replaceable. So if you get a carburetor, if it's got some age on it and it just leaks fuel all the time, you have to turn the gas off at the petcock or the fuel valve, whatever you want to call it. In the industry, it's called a petcock. But if you want to turn that off, if you don't turn that off, you just end up flooding all the time and dumping fuel everywhere. If it leaks like that, there's a good chance that if you put a new float valve in it and it still leaks like that, that this seat itself is worn. Because this is a permanent seat and you can't replace it, your only option is to buy a new carburetor. Now, from Honda, you can't get three-wheeler parts at all, really, anymore, because Honda was one of the major losers in the lawsuits over the three-wheelers that killed them in the first place. And the way that Honda made three-wheelers go away was they just discontinued parts for them. So the only choice you would have for this machine would be to get an aftermarket carburetor. Now, this being a 200cc Honda engine, it's the same engine that's used in the XR200 dirt bikes. Obviously the XR or the ATC 200s, as well as the 1984 TRX 200 four-wheeler. So those parts are usually, because there's so many different vehicles that it'll fit, you can still find these aftermarket carburetors and a lot of the other parts on this aftermarket. So not a huge deal. But enough of the history lesson. But all right, let's remove our emulsion tube and main jet. And you'll see that emulsion tube is really nasty. There's supposed to be holes. You can see some of the holes in it, but that's supposed to be holes all the way through it, and you can't see through this emulsion tube because that jet is completely stopped up. So our kit should come with the new jet, but we've got to clean it. It won't come with the emulsion tube itself, so we'll be soaking this together. That way we have everything clean. Now we'll remove the pilot jet. Now your pilot jet is the one that typically stops up first. And this is actually a good time to point something out. I keep having people ask me in the videos and the comments, and mind you, I welcome all of your questions and I try to respond to every one of your comments personally. But they'll say, you know, how can I let my bike run until it dies, and you know it still doesn't start, or it'll start, but you know, it doesn't run right after it's been set up, but you know, I let it run until it died. Well, here's the reason why that doesn't work. This is your pilot jet. This is responsible for starting and idling and everything up to about a quarter throttle. Your main jet is up here. Now, if you invert this, you'll see that the main jet is much lower in the carburetor than the pilot jet right here. So if you just let it sit and idle until it dies, it's going to run down to this level and then it's out of fuel. But look how much is still left in the bottom of the bowl. All that you see below this, plus the length of the main jet, which is that much longer, so this much longer here, plus the fact that they cast a cavity in the bottom of this, so you'll end up with about a half a bowl full of fuel. So what it does is you can start and idle it after you've let it run till it died, but every time you go to throttle it, you get above a quarter throttle, it just dies. It hesitates and it dies because it's starving for fuel, because your main jet is clogged because it's set in a half a bowl of fuel and it just degraded and turned into varnish. Now, the way that you avoid that, and what we always tell people, is you use this drain screw. Don't let it run until it dies. Matter of fact, don't even waste your time doing that at all. Turn your fuel off, loosen this drain screw, which just goes in here. You don't even have to take it out, you just have to loosen it. And fuel will drain out through this tube, so you can just put a pan under it, see where it comes out under the bike, and just drain that until it's empty. That's the way that you'll prevent yourself from having issues later. But like I said, I've seen that a lot, and I've had those questions posed to me that they, you know, let it run till it died, and it didn't help. So what can they do? Well, that's what you can do. So now we'll remove the pilot jet, like so. We'll put it in the bowl. We'll just give it a quick look, make sure we got all the rubber pieces off and anything else that I want to remove. Okay, that's ready to soak. Now the one thing I am going to do different is, because this float is so nasty, I'm going to go ahead and put it back in the perch, slide the pin through it. I'm going to go from this side, slide the pin back in it and hold this float down so it gets soaked as well, and we can get this all this gunk off of here. So once that soaks, it'll take probably an hour or two. I'll be back and we'll rebuild it and put it back together. Okay, we're not clean yet because I noticed something. When I was doing my pre-soak check, I realized I never pulled the O-ring and the washer out for the pilot screw. You've got this little tiny little O-ring and washer, and I'll show them to you right there, and those go on that pilot screw. And I needed to get my super special tool, which looks a lot like a drywall screw, because, well, it is, and get that out before I soaked it, but I forgot to do that. Just thought I'd let you know. Alright, we'll be back after it's clean. Okay, welcome back. We've got the carburetor soaked and clean. I actually let it sit overnight, and you can see this bowl is, well, it's pretty clean. And then here's the rest of the carburetor and the floats. You'll see they were pretty nasty, and now they're nice and clean. So we're going to go ahead and start our rebuild. Now this kit that I have for this one is not a Quad Boss kit. It is one that is called Armor Tech. That's from one of our other vendors. Unfortunately, while Armor Tech does make, while Quad Boss does make a lot of kits, they don't make them for everything. And being as three-wheelers are kind of, well, they've been on the way out for a long time, there's really not that many of them. It's kind of hard to find a kit, and some of the items that are in this kit are going to be incorrect, because if you can see here, if I can hold this right, it's for a range of stuff. It's for the 83 ATC 185, 83 ATC 200, 84 ATC 200E and ES. And this is an M model, so it's not specifically for this, but there are a few items in here that we do need that will transfer over. So there's going to be some items that we're not going to be able to use, but the really important stuff we can. So we'll open this up, we'll dump it out, and most of the stuff will work. So we'll check this O-ring for the front. Yeah, that'll work. So that goes in here. Now, this would have originally had, and does have, a formed bowl gasket. They gave me a round O-ring. Theoretically speaking, this should work, but it may be a little tricky, and I may actually have to put a little bit of silicone or something on this to get it to hold into the groove, to be able to get it back on there, because I don't know if it's going to be nice and just sit there like I want it to. But we'll give it a shot and see if it'll work. I hate putting silicone on carburetor bowls because it tends to make them incredibly difficult to get off, but yeah, that's just not going to stay in there. It really wants to be round. So yeah, I'm going to have to put a little bit of stuff on here to get that. We're not going to worry about that right this minute. We're going to worry about the rebuild. Now, you can see our carburetor's clean, and we're ready to start reassembling. And what I always like to do first is to make sure that all of our items that we are reusing are clean. Now this is the emulsion tube. Very few kits actually come with emulsion tubes, and you can look at this now and see that while you can see the holes now, there's a little bit of some discoloration still up here at the top. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some double-aught steel wool, and we're going to take this and just turn it like so. And it'll get that little bit of roughness off there just so that the fuel flows. Actually, air flows on the outside of this. Air flows on the outside and fuel flows through the inside. So we need both of those to be clean, and it's pretty clean now. So I go ahead and use a bit of brake cleaner. I can turn this where you can see it. This is what we use. You can use anything similar that you can find that is, doesn't leave a residue. And then I'm just going to spray this out. Make sure that that's good and clean. Spray out the outside. Make sure there's no more stuff in there. Let me zoom out just a bit. I think you may be missing some stuff there. I've got it zoomed in too far. All right, we'll set that aside. And this is the needle out of the slide. Now you didn't see me take this out, but I'll show you how to put it back on. And taking it out and putting it back on is basically the same thing, only backwards. But it wasn't that difficult. I'd forgotten to take it off when I first started the video yesterday, but we're going to put it back in now. So we're going to take the needle had a lot of, I did show the needle when I took it out, and it had some varnish on it, so I'd soaked that as well. So that's cleaned up. Now we're going to take this little funny looking clip, we're going to squeeze it just a bit, and we're going to put it down in this slide. Whoops. Let me go ahead and just drop that all over the place. Now the way that you want to put this in, because this slot here is where the throttle cable goes through, you stick it through this hole, slide it all the way down, and pull it up. So we're going to take this and make sure that we've got, it looks like a little A. We're going to make sure that the open part of that A is where the cable can fit through it. So if I can get it to cooperate here, there we go. And it'll sit in there like that. Now I do need to get it completely seated in there just by doing this. Now it's completely seated in down in there, so we can put our cable on. Now let me move the camera. This is the throttle cable where it's going to go on. Let me zoom in and we'll go up a little bit more to where we can see that. This is the cable. You're going to take the slide, stick it through the hole. Well, first off, don't forget the spring. Put the spring on there. It would be really easy to put on without the spring, but it wouldn't work. So take that, put your cable through, let go of the spring, and just pull it down until it pops over, and you'll see it lock in to the base of the slide right there. So that's the way your throttle cable should look. Alright, so we got that. Now back to the carburetor. On Amazon, you can find them too. Just look for K&L jet wires or whatever you want to call them. I don't think they've got a part number on them per se, but they'll look just like that. So pretty easy to find. We're going to take one of these sizes out. We're not worried about the exact size, because all we want to do, we don't want to make this jet bigger. We just want to make sure that there's, now that's too big, so we don't want that. We just want to make sure that there's not any varnish around the inside edge of the hole, because that'll effectively make the jet smaller, which means it'll run lean. Alright, I'm just going to run that around on the edges, make sure it's good and clean. And you can see these wires have a little bit of a knurl to them, so it's kind of it's almost like a file. So don't get just real aggressive with that, because you could actually end up making the the hole in the jet not round. I'm just spraying this out to make sure there wasn't any debris left in there. Alright, now we're going to take this back into the main jet holder, but what I need to do first is to make sure, yes, that piece that's inside the throat, that is the nozzle that's in the middle of that, make sure that doesn't fall out. Most of the time they don't, but they can. When you're cleaning them, they can jump out of there, so make sure that's in there. Then we're going to tighten this snug, and if you wanted to know, that's a 7mm. Not a very popular size, but of course Snap-on makes it. You may not want it, but Snap-on makes it. Now, the pilot jet that came in the kit is a standard type pilot jet that you would see in most applications. That is not going to work for this. This is a totally different pilot jet. You'll see that the threads are way down here at the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean this pilot jet and put it back in. So what I'm doing right now is holding up to the light to look in it, and I don't see a hole. So we're going to take our smallest wire, and it's the one that has this little this larger piece on the bottom to help prevent it from, keep it from breaking or bending. We're just going to make sure that that hole is indeed open, and it clearly is. Now let me look through it again up to the light. I still don't see a hole in it, but we're gonna spray through it, and that indicates that is most definitely open. Let me see if I can get it to where it's not shooting the brake cleaner towards the camera. Okay, there we go. Alright, so that's definitely open. So we're good to reinstall this. This will go right here. Flat blade screwdriver. And there were a couple of jets in this kit, one being the pilot jet that I showed you was wrong. There is a main jet in here as well, but I'm going to assume that one's probably wrong. So I'm not going to reuse that either. But like I said, there were several items in this kit that we did need. So we're definitely going to use that. Now we've got a new mixture screw. This is the same mixture screw, so we can definitely reuse that with the new spring, O-ring, and washer. So we're going to stack that. Need to open this little package. And we're going to get out, we need the float valve too. We're going to get out our little bitty washer, put that on there against the spring, and our itty bitty O-ring. Slide that down on there, and then I'm going to invert the carburetor so that that doesn't fall off, and put this in. Now we'll use a standard factory adjustment. We're going to lightly seat this, like right there, not very hard. We're going to go 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, 4/2, 5/2 turns. That's 2.5 total turns. The reason I go by half is because it's easier to keep an eye on, because it's a flat blade. When you're trying to do whole turns, you might forget exactly where it was. So you're just going, basically taking this and a 180 and taking it in a 180, and each time that's a half turn. So that keeps you from messing that up. Now as far as the float valve goes, clearly we're not going to be reusing this old crummy one here. We're going to compare and make sure that our new one is the same. Okay, I'm back, and I did find another new float valve. It came out of a kit for a XR200, which is very similar engine to this that uses the same carburetor. So anyway, luckily I had one of those, but I do not recommend this Armortech kit at all, because they clearly took some liberties in saying what it fit and it didn't fit, because it's not really that close. So yeah, we don't want that. Now we're going to check our float level, And we want that to, whoa, that was like way too high. Hang on a sec. Let's move this up a little bit and I'll show you what I'm doing. We just want it to where when we lift it up, if you can see that pin, we want that pin to stop, or the float valve to stop moving and that pin to start compressing right about the time that the float, this flat section of the float is parallel with this flat section of the carb body. So we're going to take a look at that together here, and that looks awfully darn close. Might go down just a little bit. Let me bend this tab here, adjust that down, and let's see how that looks. Oh yeah, that's pretty well spot on right there. So it's stopping that, and it stops where it's parallel, and then as you move past that, it's compressing the little pin in the end of the float valve. So that's just what we want right there. Now let me get a little bit of silicone and put in that bowl to start being able to get that O-ring to fit in there. So I will be right back. Okay, I've got some silicone here, so we'll put just a tiny bit, as little as we can get away with, just to hold that O-ring in there to that shape, because this round O-ring does not like getting bent like that. We're just going to go around it with just a tiny bit, just to kind of hold that in there. Let's say this is not my preferred method, but I don't really have much of a choice because kits are very limited for these, so you kind of gotta go with what you got. So luckily we were able to find a float valve that worked, so that was good. But yeah, all right, that might be enough. We'll take this and see if we can get it to fit around this edge and actually stay in there. We don't want to stretch it while we're putting it in there, or it's going to end up being too long at the end. So we want to just try to press it straight down into the groove, and if we're lucky, we'll get it to hold in there. I mean, the silicone isn't set, of course, but at least it's really sticky, so hopefully it'll stay there. Alright, there we go. That looks terrible. Normally I wouldn't do something like that, but unfortunately I don't have a lot of choice, but it will work. But it may be a little difficult for the next person that tries to take that bowl off, I'll guarantee you that. Alright, now we'll take this and carefully place it back on the body, so we don't want to get any of that silicone in anywhere important. Now we'll screw the bowl back on. Like so. Okay. Now you can see the choke is spring loaded to be closed all the time, so our lever actually holds it open. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our little spring back in. Well, let me get it where I want it. Come on now. Thank you. That's how you place the, see if you can see that or not. That's where you place the flat for the cover, and then we're going to take this and carefully put this on. We've got to preload it, so I'll just fall off. We've got to preload this spring because it's going to want to be holding up or holding the choke open, and it goes over this. I'm going to take that, see if we can get the choke to move like so, and slide it down on the pin. Now our choke is held open all the time like we want it to be, and then when you pull the cable it releases the choke. So that's how it works. Now we'll put our keeper back on there. It's our cable holder and the keeper. That on there. We'll put the screw back in it. Okay. Now we'll take our drain screw. We did not get a new drain screw, but we did get a new O-ring for a drain screw. So we'll put the O-ring on here. It's a tight little O-ring too. Let me get my pick. Down the threads now, and then I can get it over into the groove that it actually sits in, like so. And there we go. I like to put just a little bit of lube on there. This is just the penetrating lubricant that we use. Put that on there just to kind of give that O-ring maybe a little bit of reason not to stick to the aluminum of the carb body. Then we're going to screw that in until it seats firmly, because that's our drain screw. Okay, we've pretty much built the carburetor now. Now all we got to do is reinstall it. I'll be right back for that. Okay, I'm going to try to do this from the opposite side so you can see what I'm doing. Let me turn this around so I can see what you're seeing. And we're going to do basically the same thing we did yesterday. We're going to go back through this side. We're going to get the carburetor in the spot where it's got to go. Get it into the tube coming from the air box, which it is no longer stuck to anymore because we got it out. That's helpful. But we still got to line it up exactly. So let's see if we can get that to go in there. Now, it's kind of going in there, but I'm going to have to work that around. And we're going to go ahead and just get the bolts, the studs lined up. And then I will, feeling back through the air box itself, I can see if that boot is all the way on there. And it appears to have jumped on there by itself. Let me get a light and just confirm. It almost did. Let's give it a little bit of a wiggle here, and we'll try to get it to set down all the way into the boot. It's really important to have it connected to that so that we don't get water or dirt or anything else that might be able to bypass the filter and end up going into the engine. Okay, now that is all the way down. I can confirm that all the way around and there. So I'm going to go ahead and get my long screwdriver and tighten that back up, because we've got to go through this hole that's up here. I'm going to hold this clamp from the bottom, and we're going to tighten that clamp back up. Alright, that's good and tight. Now we'll put the mounting nut back on. One of them, the one on this side. Then I'll come around and do that one. And I'll go ahead and go do that one because my 10mm wrench is on this side. So let me get my other nut here. We're going to place that on the mounting stud. It's a little tricky because the choke mechanism is right in front of it. There we go. Alright, we got that on there. Now we can go ahead and take our 10 millimeter, tighten those up. Little tricky to get in here, but not impossible. It looks easier than it is once you actually try to do it. We're going to get that pretty snug there. Not tremendously snug, but definitely where it's not going to leak or fall off. But these studs are actually molded into this rubber boot, so you can spin them if you get them just too tight, which ruins the intake boot and you have to buy a new one. Alright, now we'll tighten that one up, and then we'll take our slide and we're going to put it back in the carburetor. Now on this slide you'll see there is that long notch that the cable went through, and then there's a ramp side. That's for your idle. So when you put this back in, make sure that it goes all the way down to the carburetor. There's a locating pin that goes in that slot. Make sure you can feel that pin, and the slide goes basically all the way down before it really starts compressing the spring. Now it's going to compress it some, but it's going to basically go most of the way down. That went about to about 1/4 of an inch above the body of the carburetor before it started compressing the spring. If it starts compressing the spring, you know, you're only like halfway in with the slide. That means you either have the slide in backwards or it got stuck on the way in and it's not lined up with the slide. And the problem with that is when you go to start it, it may be running almost wide open. So not a good thing to do. So we're going to screw that cap down all the way. Just need to snug it. You don't need to, just a good hand tight. You don't need to put a wrench or pliers on it. And then we're going to verify that our throttle is returning. And that's clearly returning. We got a little bit of slack in the thumb throttle, letting us know that that slide is indeed all the way down. Alright. Now we'll take our drain line that I removed when I took it off, run it back down where it belongs, and that it just basically goes to where it can drain to the ground without being on top of anything. So you just kind of want to give it a straight shot to the ground, and then we'll just push that back on the nipple on the base of the carburetor. Then we just need to put the fuel line on. We're ready to set the tank back on, and because this tank is pretty darn clean and I don't have much line to work with, normally we would try to put an inline fuel filter on this, but it's not really possible on this one because the fuel line's not straight enough to be able to put one in without causing a bind. Now that we've got that out of the way, we'll put our cleat back up that holds the cables, or the wire bundle rather, and we'll put our choke cable back in. Gonna line up the slot, the lever itself, push that in. We'll lift the cable up, and then we'll place it into the holder. Okay, let me get the cable stay around, if it'll work with me here. It's got a notch in the very top of it that has to line up. I don't think that I have quite enough, and that's what I didn't want to have happen. It dropped the whole thing off. Well, that's not the end of the world. We can put that back on there. It's got a little tab on it here that has to go into the cam up here, or the mount rather, to lock it. And it was turned and it didn't want to turn by itself, so I had to loosen up the screw and it just fell out. So anyway, there we go. We've got that started. And let's see about an adjustment on that cable. let's push the cable all the way down now. So that's, whoa, that's way too far. That actually pushed the cable back out of the lever. So we definitely need to move this cable up in the bracket. So let's get it much higher up here. And actually probably all the way up to where the metal section is would be better. Okay. Now that's tight. Now let's see what we've got as far as, whoops. Okay, the choke lever is all the way down and it returns just fine. So we're good. Alright, now we just need to put the tank on, turn the petcock on, give it some fuel, and see how she runs. Let's get those in the right spot. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. It took a little bit longer than I was expecting. I realized that I hadn't activated the battery that goes in it. We did replace the old flooded cell, spit acid on the ground and all over the frame. Tie battery with a maintenance free, which is a nice upgrade. It'll keep it from spitting acid and you know, rusting away things that you can't get anymore. It's also important too, if on your machine, if there's a maintenance free equivalent, I would highly recommend that at any point. But let's get where I've got the tank back on. That was just a matter of sliding on the rubbers, putting the one bolt in the back, sliding the fuel line back on it, and turning the gas on. Now we'll see what adjustments we need to make. Okay, I'm going to do a lean rich adjustment on the fuel screw, and I'll be right back to show you how to do that. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to screw it in until it slows down, and then we'll take it back out until it slows down and split the difference. I think we're idling too fast for it to make use of it, so I'm going to idle it down some. Idling too fast, it's not really using the pilot jet fully, so it's hard to adjust it. There it's slowed down on the rig side. There it's slowed down on the lane side. Now we'll split the difference to our highest, smoothest idle in between. So that's pretty much got it. That's a 1984 ATC 200M. Honda, they just don't know when to die. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope this helped you out. If it did, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll know when we post something else. If you'll hit the notification bell, you'll be the first to know when we post something else. You can catch us on the web at www.jwsrepairservices.com. And as always, thanks for helping support our channel. And if you find it in your heart, if you'll hit that subscribe button, it's free to you, but it really helps us build our channel and get more people see our videos. So thanks for watching. Have a great day. Alright, sound check. How loud is the fan in here? Why am I turning my head? There we go. That's good. Alright, get ready for a replay.